Hello, Ivy here. This week's podcast is entitled Continual Coercive Control Activities Across Borders by the UK cartel since November 2019. Let's start with a little bit of context. The Duke and Duchess of Sussex stepped back from senior royal duties at the end of March 2020. Prince Harry announced their decision to step back in order to protect their mental health due to the continued activity of UK media on the 8th of January 2020 after returning to the UK from a 6-week break in Canada to assess and finalise their situation. During that time, their location in Canada was leaked to the press by the royal family and their security was removed. A tabloid employee also contacted the Sussexes and informed them that he was aware that they were contemplating on leaving their roles, and he wanted a story. That same individual gave the Sussexes 10 days in which to respond. Otherwise, the tabloid concerned would print the story anyway. The same individual who continuously bombarded a female presenter with negative articles, and even on her birthday published an article with a supposed birthday card image containing items which indicated blood splats. The same presenter committed suicide shortly afterwards, and that media employee, like many others that day, it was announced that this lady had taken her own life, spent that day erasing articles that they had written about her for months. Towards the end of her life, the articles were daily and multiple in numbers, and none of them anything but critical and accusatory. The receipts exist, so there can be no denying the removal of articles and posts on social media by most of the tabloid media the day the suicide was made public. Lessons were clearly not taken on board, if ever they were understood, because this same style of reporting has been going on for years in the UK and continued after the death of the said presenter. The target in this case was Meghan, the Duchess of Sussex. Meghan was targeted as soon as the tabloids knew of the relationship between her and Prince Harry, and in obvious partnership with the royal family, a plan of action was put in motion that had no positive end goal. And when the first objective failed, which was to ensure that a marriage never took place, things became far more sinister and dangerous. Every goal that the media and the royal family set themselves failed, and the silence of those in government over the treatment of a USA citizen in this way on UK soil implies complicit consent. There were and are other forces acting against the Sussexes, but from 2016, the three I have just mentioned have been at the helm. At no point did any of the establishment step forward and implicitly state that this had to stop. None of the charities that the Duchess supported stepped forward either, but all were benefiting from her input. The very first project that Meghan took on was the community kitchen that emerged from the trauma and tragedy of the Grenfell fire. The women of that kitchen became and remain public supporters of Meghan and Harry. The kitchen was not a patronage, but yet it has been the most supportive, no doubt helped by the fact that the women all knew and lived the day-to-day experience of being treated differently because of their ethnicity. The tabloids, even in this traumatic period, wrote a series of articles that were beyond shameful, truly disgusting, with zero concern or interest about the deaths of over 70 people, and the ongoing social issues that continue today. This is the style and culture of the UK media, both printed and televised, and this is the backdrop to a culture of isolationism and treating people who are not considered sentient beings as acceptable to be treated without any respect. To summarise, the UK treatment of refugees and also people from Commonwealth countries are just two examples of the difference in treatment by the tabloids and the government in the UK. When you hear about those two examples, then the subsequent treatment of Meghan marrying into the UK royal family will come as no surprise. Even Harry, I am sure, never for one moment thought his family and country could operate in this way. But, as he has said himself, the things he is learning and experiencing and seeing firsthand since his marriage to Meghan has opened his eyes. The fact that Harry speaks about those experiences and has in fact had to remove his wife and children from the UK for their safety lets the world know that Harry understands now. And I doubt if he knew then what he knows now, he would have left the UK before March 2020. Refugees seeking safety on UK soil have not been welcomed, and more importantly, have not been treated sympathetically with respect. In fact, there was a time that they were described as roaches. Recent refugees seeking safety are from the Ukraine. All refugees should be treated with respect and care, but yet the UK acted differently to Ukrainian refugees than any other. People of the UK were offered payments to take families into their homes and to give them a place of safety until things could be worked out. People from the Ukraine were and are treated humanely, and rightly so, like all people in that situation should be treated. Other refugees were treated like roaches, and the future plan from the UK, officially described as a partnership with Rwanda, is to ship people off to Rwanda to be processed, an out-of-sight, out-of-mind mentality, and one which the UK could give two XXXX about how the day-to-day quality of life will be. None of the government ministers concerned care one iota. Rwanda, a place where there is a mountain of evidence of major serious breaches in human rights, but it is obviously deemed as not a problem for the UK to worry about, as it is not their concern right now. But at the same time, Ukrainians are being rightly housed around the country, the UK that is, and not shipped off to a known dangerous place to be processed by people who are also of no interest to the UK. The other group I wish to mention for the purpose of this topic of human rights breaches and the differences in treatment by people from different groups and backgrounds. The UK has enjoyed telling the world that there are 50 plus countries as part of the Commonwealth. In my mind, it is just another description that sounds better than describing them as being part of the British Empire and their colonisation of various nations. We have the ongoing scandal of the Windrush deportations from the UK to Jamaica, returning people, some of whom left the island as babies with their parents, who answered the call from the UK to travel and work in the UK in sectors such as transportation and health. Now that some of those nations are critical of the way the UK treats them, and they have seen how the UK treated the first person of colour to enter the royal family, and who had to leave the country because of risk to life and limb, the monarchy and its press and its government are not looking too good right now. Not to mention the questionable business dealing that has gone on over the years, and the involvement of legal matters which allow them to alter things in favour of the monarchy wishes. For example, the royal family do not have to comply with equality and diversity legislation. Only the black nations have to apply for a visa to enter the UK. Black nations from the Commonwealth I'm talking about here. But the white ones, such as New Zealand and Australia, do not have to apply for a visa. They are free to travel regardless. So, in case you have missed my point on these examples, the people of colour are and continue to be treated adversely compared to their white Caucasian counterparts. I believe, with my non-legal brain, that the action of sending refugees to Rwanda to be processed is a breach of human rights legislation. But the white refugees are treated differently. The treatment of the women of Grenfell in the media was vastly different to the rest of the passages. The treatment of Commonwealth countries is different dependent upon skin colour. The treatment of the only person of colour to enter the UK royal family is vastly different to any other member who has married in. The absolutely daily onslaught by UK media on the Sussexes, and in particular Meghan, is in breach of so many areas of law, yet not one legal expert in the UK has stepped up and challenged the UK stance. And for that matter, the established international forums usually cherry-pick the nations where they intervene and say nothing about the others. I would argue that a high-profile case, such as a member of the UK royal family being treated so badly on UK soil and then on USA soil, is something that I find unjustifiable to be ignored. Meghan and Harry's treatment is the tip of a growing iceberg of people who are in no position to challenge their abusers, and who in some cases have taken their own lives out of despair, and others are heavily impacted by growing mental health issues. The Duchess herself had suicidal ideation and was refused assistance by the royal family because it would be embarrassing for the family. The Sussexes miscarried a baby in the middle of a very nasty and insidious campaign of the content of reporting on the Sussexes, and when a royal reporter admitted on camera and also in a podcast that they were in close contact with the Royal Human Resources team and were aware of Meghan's suicidal ideation, rather than back down, the royal reporters doubled down on the onslaught. What was the end game here? Whether it was crushing spirit or end of life, none of them thought that Harry would take his family out of the toxic environment and become independent from this cruel and abusive environment. A group of us have started a campaign aimed at the international legal community for the updating of the new ways of abusive behaviour spreading via electronic means, and that abusers and their victims need not be in the same town or country to deliver their blows. The incitement of hatred on people of all ages has implications for all countries, not just those who appear as the face of the very obvious network which operates and funds it from a variety of sources and chains that clearly are set up to hide the person at the top of the chain. Enough is enough. Meghan and Harry are part of a much wider group of people who are suffering, and the global community needs to step up or step aside and let others take the reins to tackle these new types of issues. coordinated and financed groups and the social media platforms and channel owners who are making telephone number size profits from inciting hatred and describing it as freedom of speech. Time for action. Under the basic tenet of human rights legislation, there are many categories of law that run parallel to what is going on with the Sussexes, and where action has been taken against people who are not considered powerful or wealthy. Yet, when it comes to people in powerful positions and who have senior professional posts in the business or legal world, or are considered as influencers in certain areas of business or politics, then the world turns a blind eye until things become so serious, or what was once hidden comes to light. The powers that be are forced to respond in some way, even if it is decades too late for the victims of those activities. When you read about these examples, which I'll quote soon, if you replace partner, ex-partner, spouse, etc., with all those groups of people who have abused the Sussexes, for example, the royal family, the tabloid press, royal reporters, government by their silence are complicit, keyboard warriors, the other blood relatives with less funds, they are behaving like an ex-partner who refuses to accept that the marriage is over, and are now becoming dangerously obsessed with pursuing them and putting their lives at risk. With an added bonus of income generated from inciting hate and describing it, as I said, as freedom of speech. If, on the rare occasion, the abusers are powerful and or wealthy, and their victims are in a similar category, there seems to be a position taken that say to anyone caring to watch that it is best to let them sort it out between themselves. No need for us to be interested. It is just rich folk doing their thing. If the victim is a person of colour, then it seems it matters even less. The view seems to be the victim has the financial means to pay for multiple legal actions and can move home several times in order to try and remain safe, can afford to pay for top-class security teams, etc. Everyone knows deep down, if the perpetrators were people of colour, it would rarely take decades for legal professionals to step in. If the victims are poor Caucasians and their abusers are wealthy and powerful, etc., no one is interested until the abusers have long since passed on. The basic aspect of everyone is entitled to protection under the law seems to be pushed to one side. The danger with this is that victims are left to suffer, and if the abuse continues for years, the cost to the individuals concerned is more than financial, and therefore the damage to the authorities and the countries concerned is not easily repaired. Here's a quote from Sandra Hawley, the Chief Executive of Refuge. Abusive men are just as likely to be lawyers, accountants and judges as they are to be unemployed. It is about power and control. I regard the treatment of Meghan and Harry, Meghan in particular, like that of a person in a violent marriage. I stated this in 2 podcasts last year in 2021. The abuser continually trying to erode the self-esteem of their victim and telling them how they could be nothing without them and to put fear in their minds about leaving. When that victim manages to escape, the abuser then goes on the defensive, trying to justify their actions and ultimately try to make life so difficult outside of the marital home that the victim returns and becomes compliant and in fact, inevitably, the level of abuse is worse than before. I have used the Kubler-Ross 7 Stages of Grief model in the past to show how the British royal family, the royal reporters working for the tabloids, and who have an invisible contract with the monarchy, to always give them positive coverage in return to access to the royals for exclusive scoops, etc. I include government in that analogy, aristocracy and keyboard warriors in the frame. It is very useful as a model for a number of things. Highly recommend you look it up, and also, if you have time, read my article which maps categories from the model to particular antics of the above groups. Today, we're looking at coercive control and how it can apply to describing what has been and continues to be done against Harry and Meghan. Experts have thus often used the non-injury model of coercive control to explain the dynamics of an intimate partner violent situation. But it is not restricted just to that. It's just one example. The term was first popularised in 2007 by the work of Dr. Evan Stark, who describes coercive control as a pattern through which abusive partners, typically males, employ combinations of violence, intimidation, isolation, humiliation, and control. I list reference material and websites at the end of the article that goes with this podcast to help you on a journey of discovery of some of these topics. I try to give you a user-friendly starting point, and I have done the same with this one. Let's have a look at post-separation control. This is a form of abuse that a male ex-partner uses to maintain power and control over a woman, long after the marriage or relationship is over. Gender can be either. Think of all the groups I have mentioned, particularly the royal family and its partners in the media, behaving as though they are trying to keep control over what Harry and Meghan do in life, still desperately trying to cling on to power over their actions. The royal family never once anticipated that Harry would leave with his family. The aim was clearly to destroy Meghan. In any way it panned out, and if she remained alive, she would get up and walk away. No one thought that Harry would leave too. The next step was to take away their security and to reveal their location in Canada, and then again in USA, in Tyler Perry's property. Charles was apparently responsible for the security leak and the details of their location, along with stopping funding early on in the 12-month transition period that the royal family themselves insisted on having in the first place. Charles was willing to place his own son in danger in an effort to force him home and to secure more years for the monarchy as a result. They would never risk the life to the heir to the throne, but the spare was expendable. What a family. The irony of a black man from an industry that the UK constantly malign as of no importance stepped forward and provided security and a home for the Sussexes, and sent a private plane to collect the Sussexes from Canada and to take them to their LA property. That's not wasted on me. Gives me joy every time I think about it. And I always say, and will continue to say, God bless Tyler Perry, an angel on this earth. Another example in this dangerous game being played regarding security for the Sussexes when or if they visit the UK, Harry offered to pay for the services of the Metropolitan Police whenever he and his family are in the UK for whatever purpose. The last visit for the funeral of his grandfather proved to be problematic, whereby his vehicle was chased by paparazzi on the return to the airport. A Freedom of Information request has revealed that it is normal for the Met Police to be hired out by private individuals or organisations for certain periods or events. The Sussexes do not want security at taxpayer expense. The Sussexes do have their own private security team that is with them at all times, but they are not allowed to carry guns in the UK, whereas they can within the States. Funding has been refused twice, and now there is an appeal process underway. It seems that the press are reluctant to accept responsibility for the increased risks to the Sussexes due to the nature and content of the reporting in the media, both televised and in printed format, along with online newspaper editions. The compromise offered to the Sussexes was that if they stayed at Clarence House, the home of Prince Charles, when they visited the UK, then they would have the benefit of tax-funded protection by the Met Police officers, as the rest of the family do now. Anything outside of that location of residence for each visit, then security paid or free, was not an option, hence the appeal. Never forget that the next two heirs to the throne sit on the board that decides who receives protection from the Met for hire or not. I would argue that there is a huge conflict of interest. To have two members of the royal family decide on whether or not a family member can have what everyone else in the royal family has for free has been refused to be allowed to pay for security, and in so doing go about their business without discussing it with any of the royal family because of the nature of the visits, would be their private business visits, and equally they should be allowed to stay wherever they wish to throughout their visits, because they would be paying for it. And they are no longer working royals, therefore no one in the royal family needs to know their itinerary for any visit that is not royal business. By only allowing security if the Sussexes stay on royal grounds indicates, in my opinion, a way to exert control over the Sussexes if they visit the UK, and therefore any non-royal business would be private art-royal business, which the Met Police Committee are currently stating that the Sussexes cannot pay like all other famous people, and ex-politicians do all the time with no problem. The real issue here is about control. Often, when the abuser is in a position of power, the abuse is not physical, not least because the potential for reputational damage. The control is often psychological and emotional terrorism, which is harder to prove. One example, control tactics using the legal system to repeatedly drag women through expensive litigation or launching a defamation campaign in an attempt to silence or discredit the victim and to preserve the reputation of the abusers. Think here of Meghan and her treatment by the royal family and the media in particular. All of those tactics are clear to see when you stand back and make comparisons with those proven academic models I am quoting, and what has been happening to the Sussexes. There is a civil and criminal law already in place to deal with coercive control, and with my non-legal mind, I fail to see how it can be too far a step to take to apply the law after 5 years and ongoing of abusive activity in various forms. Never forget, Meghan had suicidal thoughts. We nearly had a second death in the royal family under questionable circumstances and with clear evidence of various strands of activity which was put in place to drive Meghan out of the family by any means. Stonewalling, gaslighting and threats of legal action are all part of an abuser's repertoire. They employ these and other tactics to retain power and control to ensure that you are prevented from exposing them. Think here of the royal family and the media. remember their behaviour before the Oprah interview even came out. And they are doing the same now about a book that is still being written and will not be published until later this year. Only people who are guilty of less than good behaviour would be worried about a TV interview yet to air or a book yet to be published. The two groups doing the most protesting, hiding behind other labels, are the family and its media. Speaks volumes to me, and is all part of trying to desperately cling on to the control and the narrative, using a decades-old playbook which is no match for the astute minds of the Sussexes, exhausting as it must be for Harry and Meghan. I repeat, what are legal minds doing? What has to occur for a trigger to move to action mode? The Women's Aid Group, and it's listed in the reference material, say, one of the statements is, controlling behaviour is designed to make a person dependent by isolating them from support, exploiting them, depriving them of independence, and regulating their everyday behaviour. Think here how Meghan was asked to make herself less visible. Think here how Meghan was asked to be 50% of herself. Think here how Meghan's passport and ID, credit cards, car keys, etc. were kept by HR, which meant she would have to ask for them if needed. They would know her every move. Name removed from Archie's birth certificate, only her title remains. Harry's full name and title is still there. All other royal wives have their name and title on their children's birth certificate. Only Meghan's has had hers removed. Meghan stayed in Frogmore Cottage once for 40 days without leaving it once, and still someone commented that she appeared too soon. Many grassroots organisations worked hard to ensure that coercive control became a criminal offence. This has marked a huge step forward in tackling domestic abuse. Now it is important to make sure that everyone understands what it is. Coercive control creates invisible chains and a sense of fear that pervades all elements of a victim's life. It works to limit their human rights by depriving them of their liberty and reducing their ability for action. Experts like Evan Stark liken coercive control to being taken hostage. As he says, the victim becomes captive in an unreal world created by the abuser, entrapped in a world of confusion, contradiction, and fear. I have referred to Laura Richards, who is an expert on coercive control and legal advocate and successful author. I've mentioned her several times in previous podcasts, and I'd like to just quote from one of her books. A number of feminist psychologists in the 1970s identified the domestic abuse victims that they worked with as living like hostages and coined the term coercive control. This dangerous form of abuse relies on a range of behaviours or actions that can be very subtle and nuanced. The intention is to exploit and dominate, and to ultimately deprive the victim of their most basic rights and needs. Over time, the victim may lose the very essence of being, the sense of who they are, their likes and dislikes, rendering their needs and desires irrelevant, hence hostage-taking and living under an enforced regime." End of quote. Strangely enough, the UK government has developed a definition of coercive and controlling behaviour, and this is from the Home Office publication in 2015. I can't say that I have seen any evidence of this in the UK, but it exists, and certainly in terms of words on paper, it's very meaningful. So, as an overview, control is described as: controlling behavior is a range of acts designed to make a person subordinate and or dependent by isolating them from sources of support, exploiting their resources and capacities for personal gain, depriving them of the means needed for independence, resistance, and escape, and regulating their everyday behaviour. Think of Meghan and Harry when you look at this. If you do look at the article, and you'll see more details around this, and just look at the phrases, and if you're like me, you will have a number of incidents, examples that you can, if you like, hang on coat pegs around coercive control. And from my work that I've done, all of the descriptions, there are examples, several examples that can be put against each description. There is nothing left wanting. So in my mind, we are well overdue for international intervention now, because clearly the UK are not going to do it. Next one, coercion, the other half of this equation. Coercive behaviour is a continuing act or a pattern of acts of assault, threats, humiliation, and intimidation, or other abuse that is used to harm, punish, or frighten their victim. End of quote. It's safe to say that the success of Harry and Meghan has not gone down well, as all the key abusers wanted the Sussexes, well, Harry at least, begging to be let back into the fold, as opposed to residing in a tent under a bridge somewhere. Harry's memoir is not even published yet, but the level of outrage and vitriol is embarrassing for all those complaining. Just to put this outrage over one book into sensible context, on Amazon alone, there are 738 UK royal biographies alone. There are other categories pertaining to all UK royals. At no point was there any outrage. None of the royal reporters had anything negative to say about any of those publications. True to form, however, anything that Harry or Meghan produce, they are treated like traitors. One can't help but think that only people who may have done undesirable things, or know about undesirable things done by others within palace walls, would be reacting this way about a book that has not yet been published and won't be until later this year. All it has done has garnered global attention and guaranteed even higher sales than it possibly would have achieved, purely because now more people worldwide are beginning to speculate what on earth did actually happen behind palace walls. As per usual, the propaganda team of the royal family gave themselves away within hours of the announcement of this forthcoming book, just like they did for a whole week before the Oprah interview with the Sussexes. 95% of what the royal reporters were blowing gaskets over for 7 days beforehand were not even mentioned in the interview, but immediately provided further receipts for the Sussexes. Karma in motion. The Sussexes are living proof, Diana was not so fortunate, of what happens when anyone expresses independent thought. Slave and master mentality is living and breathing within the royal cult that is UK taxpayer funds. This has to stop. It is like a bounty has been placed on the heads of USA citizen family, and the world is watching because it involves wealthy people. If it was a wealthy black family doing all of this, it would not still be going on now, 5 years down the line. I think this extract relating to new legislation approved in the state of California on the 29th of September 2020 is very useful in the current climate surrounding the Sussexes. I have to keep reminding people that I am not legally trained, but from the research that I have done over the years, mainly with women's groups, and an element of personal experience, the treatment behind gilded gates, or by groups who act as associates of the people behind those gates, who in turn have hired people themselves to carry out certain activities against Sussexes, has gone way beyond a family asking for a family member to return back to the fold without his wife and children. Years down the line, it has moved into a range of illegal activity, and no one yet has come forward to call it what it is. Coercive control is one of the often unseen elements of the abuse and harassment of the only person of colour to enter the UK royal family. The sheer volume of race hate, inciting bile written in scores of articles every day in the UK is in itself a crime. Sussexes have not been afforded their basic human rights, and to date have had limited protection under the laws in terms of human rights legislation at a national level, but none at an international level. After 5 years of such activity, with no action taken to prevent the flow of hate and increased risk to the Sussex family, it is safe to say that only the international legal community can take the lead on this, with the conjunction of the USA. The laws exist for a reason. International laws exist for a reason. If not, just disband all the international organisations who on paper have the power to intervene. Or is it that they only intervene on less wealthy people's behalf, or regimes who are abusive and who are also people of colour? I have zero faith in the UK legal bodies who have chosen to protect themselves rather than take on the establishment. If the international bodies are the same, then let's all shut up shop and go home, and let the revolution begin and natural selection take out those who are not popular. Let's recreate Mad Max, or The Matrix, or The Hunger Games in the modern age. Taking all the examples I have given about what coercive control means, and the daily events and culture of reporting on the Sussexes, and in particular Meghan, I believe strongly that there is a very good case for action to be taken against such treatment on an American citizen who is living her life in her own country. And the foundation that Sussexes have created for their philanthropic work is thriving and going from strength to strength. The tabloid that is the worst of the bunch is the same tabloid that Meghan had been successful in 2 court decisions about their activity towards her, and the behaviour has not ceased. I am aware of the wonderful work and legislation that has been passed in California in September 20, relating to coercive control, and in view of the fact that a family who live in the state are still being treated this way, and that one of their chief abusers of Meghan in the televised and newspaper tabloid industry has a home in California as well. He has publicly made his intentions clear on TV recently that he intends to continue his stalking of her, and the image used was of him with a clenched fist, and he said he was coming for her. This man used to verbally abuse Meghan every day, and more than half of the week he would tell her to go back to the USA. He has since been removed from his post, but he has now joined a right-winged news organisation, and his abuse continues. His stalking and obsession with and about Meghan would have had police intervention if it was the black presenter doing the same things. He's dangerous, and he resides in California for part of the year. The other UK media bullies reside in the UK and continue their activities across borders. Right now, most of them are in the Netherlands, even though the Sussexes stopped working with any of them as soon as they stepped back. Sussexes are not tax-funded, and the royal reporters are meant to report on the tax-funded royals only, yet they still pursue them and write toxic articles, because it generates more money for them than writing about the rest of the UK royal family combined. When they don't physically travel to the countries where the Sussexes are, others turn up on their behalf. The mental trauma and stress that this must cause needs to be addressed, along with the huge online coordinated targeted hate online. How many lives need to be lost or damaged before the trigger button kicks in to lead to exploration of this issue? This bullet-pointed list is from the International Bill of Rights, and in my mind summarises the things that are happening to Harry and Meghan, and as I've said earlier, many, many people who cannot afford to legally challenge their abusers. So if you think of these bullet points and think of situations and examples, some of which I have given in the article, but I have certainly given a long list of references, and you will find organisations talking about this issue, and you will see examples of incidents with other people that mirror what is going on with the Sussexes. International Bill of Rights. The right to equality and freedom from discrimination. The right to life, liberty and personal security. Freedom from torture and degrading treatment. The right to a fair trial. The right to privacy. Freedom of belief and religion. Freedom of opinion. Right of peaceful assembly and association. The right to participate in government. The right to social security. The right to work. The right to an adequate standard of living. The right to education. The right to health. The right to food and housing. And to close this podcast, time for action. Global action. You will soon hear more about this campaign, and it involves many countries and legal advocates and research groups, to name but a few, who have skills and experiences to contribute to the argument. Time to mobilise. Signing off for this week. Bye from me. Bye from Ivy. Bye.